And we're here with Cliff Dunning. Thanks for joining us, Cliff. How's it going?
Hey guys, great. Sitting here in
Yeah,
Northern
can't.
California, we just had a what they call atmospheric river nail us. Yeah, like 3 inches in about an hour, which is getting up there in terms of record.
I
But I'm
love the
doing
new
great.
names. I love the new names they're coming up with for these.
Can you
These.
believe that name? It's a
These.
great name though.
Yeah, atmospheric rivers. Well, we don't get those in Canada because it gets too cold. We have what is it, polar vortexes and stuff like that. So
But are they making up names for some of the extreme conditions? Like, I mean, atmospheric river. They're making it sound like it just it's been around forever, but it hasn't.
Well, we
yeah.
had the new one this year. Well, not the new one, the old one. They brought back El Nino.
Well, El Nino's been around.
I remember that back in the early 2000s, maybe even before that. It might have even been the 90s when I was still in like high school. They were like talking about El Nino, and I was like, didn't really know what was going on. But someone said, I heard the other day that that's why we're having such fair weather here in Alberta is because it's an El Nino year, something like that. And I was like, well, everyone's telling me it's global warming. So
El Nino in where I am in California is the heating up of the water, which can change the composition of clouds and fill them up with rain with liquid. So, I know we're having. I mean, I love it. I don't complain at all about water because here in California we're like the breadbasket for the United States, and if we don't get water, they start pumping it. And honest to God, I kind of a selective. I'm kind of a snob when it comes to my produce, and I like to eat organic. But you can tell the difference between pumped water and river water. It's weird. So,
Wow.
yeah, I want rain. We want to keep the rain.
Yeah. I just saw some. Speaking of water temperatures, I just saw this big thing they're building. They have these big ships out there, and they're pumping. They're turning water into steam and pushing it over the ocean to create all these clouds, so they can trying to cool the oceans down.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
And I was like, what is going on here? This is just, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. They don't even want to talk about the underground volcanoes that are heating the ocean,
There's a lot of really weird geological formations. I mean, you have Randall on the show. He probably gives you an earful every time he shows up, right?
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, he's actually coming back on in
Couple
2
weeks.
weeks. 2 weeks, yeah.
Hey, you're sponsoring Cosmic Summit, aren't you?
No, but we're supposed to go this year. At least I think one of us will go to Cosmic Summit.
Yeah, I'm sponsoring for the first time. I just discovered those guys. They're on the other side of the country, but they got a great lineup. I'm happy to see that.
Oh, that's great. Hopefully you'll be there. We can meet in person. That'll be great.
I'm not. I can't do. I'm coming off a tour, so I won't. I'll
Oh.
be there in spirit. 2025. I'm going to try to get myself out there. I have an old girlfriend that lives just south of there, and she's been trying to get me to come out and visit, and that's a great excuse to come to the East.
There you go. Yeah, you got a lot going on in 2024, eh?
Yeah, we added Turkey on our tour schedule, and we initially launched it, and we had a great crowd, and then the war broke out, and I lost like 50% of my people because they just are not comfortable. So,
it's not a problem for Egypt though? Just Turkey?
For some reason, Egypt is geographically further away by a few hundred miles, and so people are not as uptight about it. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, if they cross the border, Gaza and Egypt, they'd be in our face.
Yeah, but I guess there's the Sinai there to kind of buffer it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the State Department in the United States, they have high level of concern, medium level, and it's okay to go. And they basically, the United States government doesn't want anyone from America to go to Egypt right now.
Oh, really? Wow.
Well, it's medium concern, and if a lot of the people that we have in the tour have really never traveled internationally, so they freak out. So, so you got to kind of let them know.
So you're doing Egypt and Turkey and ancient Maya too.
Yeah, we're doing our Yucatan tour, which is one of my favorite places. there's a lot of new digs in a city called Uxmal, and this is really where my great interest is. I'm trying to finish a book called The Maya Controversy. Archaeologists claim that the Maya are probably 3,000 or 4,000 years old, the earliest period, and it's beginning to look like there was, and we do know this now, that there was a pre-Maya or another period that they don't really talk about that much. And as they dig down further in some of these sites, they're finding temples. They're finding, I mean, I just posted on my Facebook page evidence of a huge flood that literally covered Uxmal and Chichen Itza and that whole northern Yucatan area.
Wow.
And I had a bunch of archaeological or anthropology students go, "Where'd you get those photographs?" Well, they're turn of the century. Most of them are 1890s when the first cameras were being used. And Augustus Le Pleyong got out there, who's kind of one of the first archaeologists, and he imaged Chichen Itza, Uxmal, and some of the other small cities along that area, even Koba. And this is before anybody was out there. And I imaged, I posted photographs of Uxmal and Sail, which is a small city south of Uxmal, and the buildings are totally weathered by water. And if you look closely at the images, there's sediment, rocks, and dirt coming out of the rooms, which means that the water was receding from this from the flood. Now, we don't know if it's the Great Flood of 9,500 plus years ago. What I've found in my research is that they have been having monstrous tsunamis up until about 1,000 years ago. So this might have been a tsunami hit.
That's fascinating. We just did a show on the Maya too, which is interesting, and we both found it fascinating, and we narrated this book, and I got to bring it up because Le Plongeon, that guy you mentioned, is in the book. It's called Prehistoric World or Vanished Races, and it's a pretty big tome, and it's fairly mainstream. Like, they avoid a lot of the controversy over the mounds and stuff, but they definitely mention how broad the Maya, like how many things there are. They knew back then in the late 1800s how extensive these temples and pyramids were in the jungles. I mean, they had a couple examples in there where, like, that you cannot believe how far you can see over like a 12-mile area. It's just filled with pyramids and temples. And then so I was asking our guest,
Luke Caverns.
Who is Luke Caverns.
Luke,
like how it doesn't seem like science got very far since then in that area. Like, I feel like we've kind of lost 150 years when it comes to the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, all that.
So what's happening right now is a revolution in our understanding. Most archaeologists and anthropology students are working with data that's about 150 years old.
Oh, so from then, yeah.
So it's very, very old. And then when they graduate, they get a little bit of information, and then they can choose to become a field archaeologist, or they can be an academic, work on history, or they can be a research assistant. One of the big problems that we have when we deal with current studies is archaeologists, the pay is horrible. It's like between 40 and 60K. And here in the United States, you can't live on that. So there isn't a lot of new influx. People aren't interested in doing archaeological digs. On our show, we have an archaeologist named Jen Deo, who basically cut her teeth in Middle Eastern survey and excavation. But she only did it for a few years, and then she had to get out of it because she couldn't make a living. So she keeps writing about it, but she's not, a part of it. My whole thing is, when you speak about Augustus Leon Pleyong, is the fact that he actually learned Maya and could decipher the symbology, right? So him and Eric Thompson and a few other early archaeologists actually began discussing what was on many of these temples, stela, which are these standing stones. Pliong traces the Maya back to Egypt, and Atlan, which is Atlantis, I guess, and Mu. And he actually shows the documentation. Well, the science, the scientific method came about, and it disproved all that, because you can't prove Atlantis was around. You can't prove that Mu was around. You can't prove that the Maya migrated from another part of the world, right? That's the huge problem. We know now that you can jump on a boat and go from New Zealand to South America, or from China to California, and so forth and so on. But that's still a huge problem for academia. And this is the problem. And this is why I started my podcast. I'm constantly questioning history. I mean, I used to get kicked out of Sunday school because they'd be going, Cliff, Genesis is this, and here's the figures, and Noah. And I go, who's Jesus? Where did what's the documentation? And get out of here, leave. So it's all about questioning, and then not just questioning, collecting the scientists and the research investigators who are really beginning to reveal that there was this sophisticated culture or epoch prior to our known history. So it's a really, really big challenge. You guys do a great job with your guest list too. You got guys that are going, look what I found.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, I mean, go ahead, Darren.
Do you think that because I mean you're able to run these tours successfully? We were able to do one in Egypt. We're doing some more local stuff. The bros and Ben are doing them, multiple tours a year now to Egypt, and the thirst for more just doesn't seem. I mean, I don't know if you're noticing the same thing, but it sounds like just more and more people just want to go. And it didn't seem like when we started out the show, there was a couple things like this, but they definitely weren't as extensive, and the options weren't there to sort of see it all at once, and the special permissions and the different things that are allowed. Is that the sort of thing that might be able to maybe re-stimulate some sort of an archaeological renaissance, or is in that some ways is that taking over for archaeology?
Archaeology will always have a place, though. From the very beginning, and I started going down to Mexico my first time in Yucatan was in 1995 with a girlfriend. A Mayan elder, a guy named Humbats Min, had befriended me. I don't know if you know my history. I used to be the program director for a very big conference called Whole Life Expo, which was all over the country. And so I
went in 95. I think.
Did you really?
95, yeah, 96.
Oh, they had one in Toronto, didn't they?
I think mine was in California. I think I went to.
Okay, yeah, San Francisco and LA, yeah.
Yeah.
But I, at its peak, Whole Life Expo was drawing like 25,000 people. And the reason it was a unique show is that we had not only spirituality and topics on personal growth. A lot before my time, they were introducing the question of previous civilizations, the evidence for them. And what was strange about it is, even though there wasn't necessarily artifacts and great discoveries, people just intuitively were going, I don't believe our history. It doesn't feel right. Something's missing. And I think it's the yearning to know more is what is unveiling right now. I mean, I'm finding more and more. I mean, we just talked about Cosmic Summit. Half those people that are on that show are PhDs. Younger Dryas studies, asteroid hit studies, early civilizations that go beyond the markers of C14 dating, because carbon-14 is only good to 50,000 years. And then it's like, huh?
If that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of questions. I discovered years ago if a ruined city or an artifact has been covered in any kind of salt water like the ocean, it throws off the dating of carbon-14. And
So the flood could have fucked up everything then.
so the flood is a big one. And if you look at that page on Facebook, go to Earth Ancients, look at the ruins of that city at Uxmal, and they're dating it for a few thousand years. And I'm getting a lot of pushback by the archaeological community. They've never seen these photographs before. And I'm like, well, look what the evidence here. It's visual evidence of a flood. And they're dating it using carbon dating. And remember, if that thing was underwater a couple hundred feet, which is what my hypothesis is, all the dates are going to be out the window.
So is that are those megalithic temples underneath that, all that stuff? Some of them,
they're not necessarily megalithic, because when you think of megalithic, you're thinking of multi-ton slabs of granite and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they are brilliantly engineered, where they're using retaining walls to build up the base. And if you look at that's China. Go down a little bit.
Tell me when to stop.
Keep going. Keep going. Right there. This is look at this photo right here. Oh, the middle one. Oh, just click on the photos. Just click on the one. Okay. So that's not a great example, but that is water. See how high the sediment is in the dirt. There's another 4.5 to 5 feet of ground that they had to dig out. Go to another one. Go to another photograph. That's a good one. Keep going. I'll show you. There's one.
Oh yeah, look at the people in there. Yeah, how big it is. Yeah.
That's the actual. It's called the Pyramid of the Magician. Keep going. See the sediment and the rocks and crap coming out.
Yeah.
And the water. See, and that's a great example of rocks and dirt coming out after being underwater for God knows how long.
Just from the water sort of pulling back out of there.
Yeah. There's one towards the end that's the classic one that brought up a lot of. That's a good one. There you go.
That's all Uxmal still.
Go back one.
This one?
Well, next one. Yeah, this is classic. The water has literally torn the archway and collapsed the one next to it. And you can see huge volumes of sediment, dirt, rock, and debris that is settled as the water has receded. And this is taken in
this is in Mexico.
That's Uxmal, which is in Yucatan, Mexico.
I've never made it down that far. I've never made it down, I don't think, further south than Tulum, probably.
Well, Tulum is on the peninsula. So all you got to do is take the new Maya train and go up and connect with Uxmal.
Is the train going now?
Yeah, they just launched it.
We just heard about that the other day. Luke was just mentioning that. So, I mean, I was just telling the wife that I didn't have any reasons to go to Mexico anymore, but I might have just found one. So you just fly into Cancun for that then?
That's from what part of Canada are you in? Toronto?
Calgary.
That's a cheap way to go. I prefer Merida, the capital of Yucatan, because it's colonial and you're right next to this natural museum that has some of the most outrageous sculptures you'll ever see. Little robot beings and outfits from a different epoch, you know.
We got a question from the chat. Does Cliff think the meteor that took out the dinosaurs was the Yucatan?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think it's, a lot of people say that the Gulf of Mexico could have been from the meteor that took out the dinosaurs.
That's a good point. The only problem with that is that's millions of years ago. And I'm thinking my gut feeling is that it could be several thousand to perhaps the end of the Younger Dryas.
So that would be like so ending at the Younger Dryas sort of thing.
Yeah,
or
so
shortly after.
9,500 BC, which is roughly 12,000 years ago.
And there's Uxmal right there.
Yeah.
Well,
The
also
train,
there was 400 feet less water then. So I mean, we were just discussing this with Luke the other night, but I think we were talking to another fellow that it sounds like that whole Gulf of Mexico would have been a lake before the Younger Dryas, and a lot of that plateau would have been, you know, there. I mean, who knows? Maybe we're going to start finding pyramids under there.
well, one of the things that is fascinating is when they start using LiDAR scans, and it's so iffy in terms of areas that are scanned. Like down in Guatemala, they scanned the biosphere there, and you've heard about this. They found 60,000 unknown cities, pyramids, temples, and they were just casually scanning. Right?
Where is that? Is that up in this area here? In
No,
that
no,
real-
Guatemala.
Yeah, I'm in Guatemala right now. Yeah.
Find Tikal. Tikal. It's Tikal.
Yeah,
and
right. Yeah, right there, right up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right up
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
So they scanned 240 miles square. And I had Dr. Hansen, who's excavating El Mirador. He was part of that group that paid money to have the scan.
Wow.
He suggests, and he basically acknowledged that it's going to take 200 years to properly survey and even begin to excavate that area.
So we had Luke on, and he's still kind of stuck in this mainstream, and maybe it's right. Maybe that's why he's there. Is that, you know, when Columbus comes over in 1492 into the Caribbean, and the traders start coming, and disease kind of rips through, and it sort of slowly kills all of the Maya and up into North America and the Native Americans. But I mean, when you start talking about that many pyramids and that many cities and that much growth over it, I mean, do you think 600 years is enough? Do you like prescribe to that theory, or do you think that this is the same sort of thing as in Egypt, where it's like, yeah, sure, there was some people there, but they were living in some shit they found?
So Carlos Barreros, who unfortunately died during the pandemic, was a Guatemalan elder who lived in the highlands. He wrote a book called The Ancient Maya, 2012, in which he was told that at the height of the Mayan culture, there were 55,000 active pyramids from Yucatan all the way down to Honduras. And this goes back probably, and this is scary to talk about, at least 10,000 plus years, right? Probably more than that. I have trouble getting beyond 10,000, and I'm a college educated guy, but I'm not indoctrinated with archaeology and anthropology, which means that you have a firm stop. You can't go beyond this, or you're going to be criticized. Now, on our tours in Mexico, we have Dr. Ed Barnhard, who's a mentor to Luke. And what he says is something that's amazing. He said there's only approximately less than 1% of excavated and known Mayan cities that have been unveiled. And that's basically 30 main cities that they've been excavated.
And when you talk about those main cities, so did you say Yucatan or Maya? Maya, right?
Maya, from Yucatan Peninsula, and then go all the way down to Honduras.
So this would be one, like that would be one, like Uxmal would be one example, right?
Yeah.
So only less than 1%.
So you can see Honduras to Yucatan. It's a lot of space. That's a lot of area.
Yeah.
If at its peak there were 55,000 active pyramids, why build the pyramids? Number one, and number two, what he says at the end of that chapter is they designed it so that during the fifth age, which we're in right now, 5,500 would still be active.
Wow.
Now, when we talk about pyramids, you have to remember guys like Chris Dunn and other engineers are discovering that their earth energetic focus. In other words, the most of them that are after a certain period and before that sit on geomagnetic fields, right? So they're getting energy bubbling up. There's crystalline quartz in the center, and many of them have water channeled underneath of them, right? If you grab a copy of John Burke's book, Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, he actually goes to Tikal in the World Pyramid and measures the energy that's coming out of this thing. So there's a pyramid science that is finally being revealed to us, which is blowing everyone away. You don't hear about it from mainstream science because it's too much for them to even consider. It's like, if you guys ever go to Yucatan and you see the El Castillo pyramid, it's like, why would they build this thing 300 feet high, designed and positioned for the cardinal points? And we now know it sits over a cenote, which is a water well underneath it with a river. The thing's an active energy generator.
So is this validating the whole ley line hypothesis and that whole sort of mythology?
It validates that, but more importantly, a scientist like John Burke actually used very sophisticated electromagnetic testing equipment and actually could test when the frequencies were the highest and where they were the lowest. What he discovered was that the local Maya were using it to enhance the propagation of their food crops. They'd take seeds and put them on top, and they let it sit there for a day. Their corn grows much larger, the yields are better, and their agriculture is amazing.
So it's almost like a form of electroculture, really.
Is exactly right. It's
but just without the copper, or maybe they had copper back then too. Who knows? But
no, these pyramids were actually activated by sitting on a geomagnetic telluric field that bubbles up. And remember, if the body of the pyramid is filled with quartz crystal, it's going to magnify that. And then you have the position,
the sacred dimensional shape as well.
Yeah. And so what Burke was measuring was really high levels of energy. And I don't think that they were made just to enhance your corn seeds, Yeah. I think there was something else.
Oh, healing temples. I mean,
healing.
Like, I was watching one of your shows on the healing temples, and I mean, they were known to be. People would go there to heal, right? They'd have little rooms they'd sit in, and they'd stay overnight. I mean, there's the Egyptian Mysteries talks about all that, right?
Exactly. But we take it one step ahead, and you look at Chris Dunn's new book called Tesla, the Giza Connection, just came out. He believes that the Great Khufu Pyramid was a form of a generator of some kind. And his first book came out like 20 years ago, and he's changed his feeling about the generation of energy. The Queen's Chamber, the subterranean chamber, and now we know there's a lot of pockets of other rooms throughout the pyramid, all acted as some form of generation of energy. How it was distributed, we don't know. But one of the things that Dunn has come to understand is that the earlier epoch developed a science over thousands of years, and he basically calls their development earth scientists, earth energy scientists, because unlike us in our toxic nuclear energy or gas powered generators which pollute the air, the previous epoch was all about using natural energetics. And that's there's thousands of years of that. So what we see is like thousands of years of development.
Geomancy is probably what they would have called it back then. Right?
Sacred geometry. Exactly. Yeah. So
magical.
You guys got to go down to, from Canada, it's not that much to fly to Cancun. And then I rent a car and to see these places. And when you
rent a car to go see them, eh?
Oh yeah, you could take a bus, but then you got all the stops, right?
Yeah.
Renting a car is great.
Checkpoints or anything?
Say it again.
Is there any like weird checkpoints to go through or anything like that? Or
No, there's a pay highway, and then there's another basic highway that you have to run through every city. But if you go to the pay highway, I think it's $5 US, and it takes you right to Chichen Itza, and then will continue on and take you very close to Merida. So it basically cuts the peninsula in half.
We got a question from Ian Thorine in the chats. Would any of today's pyramids be considered active?
Yeah, the World Pyramid at Tikal is still active. I mean, Burke tested that maybe 10, 15 years ago. He didn't get around to testing all the pyramids, but that's the challenge. Chichen Itza, NASA tested Chichen Itza, the El Castillo, and Coba, which is a city close to the Caribbean, has an active pyramid. That's a very old site. I'm sure there's more. Oh, Esna in Campeche has an active pyramid in the center. Some friend of mine tested it with a handheld meter and got some really interesting readings. We don't know how many are active because no one's testing them. No one's scanning them.
So you've been to both places, and I mean, when you can't pictures just don't do it justice. There's something about going to these places and seeing outside the frame and seeing a lot of them. So you've been to Egypt quite a few times now, in and out of all those pyramids, in and out of all those sites that the public doesn't get access to. And
Yeah,
we've gone and done the Egypt one as well. So we can compare notes with you on that one a little bit more than down south. But there's very clearly some old shit in Egypt that's way older than the new stuff, and there's very clearly some weird tech or something going on there. I think it's the Assyrian, where you can see there's clearly some sort of massive stone sanding or some sort of flattening technique is being used there. And then on the smallest pyramid on the Giza Plateau, you can see it as well, where it's just like they've scooped it away. And there's the scoop marks at the Aswan quarry. Do you see any of that kind of stuff down in South America? Is there anything sort of alluding to that? It's the same sort of, because you do kind of see it in South America, right? In South America,
I haven't been to Peru yet. We were going to do a tour during the pandemic, and everyone kind of bailed. Plus, they weren't handling their citizens very well, and people were like just sick all over the place. So we didn't want to get on a plane and go down there. You guys know about Pumapuku, and that is an area that Burke tested, and the Tiwanaku, which is a pyramid area next to Pumapuku, he discovered that it's got a massive geological fissure that's bubbling up tons of energy. And he measured it in all of the stonework. So the stonework actually was a conductor. And so not only is the pyramid actively pulsing this energy, it's connected to the nearby buildings. So it's all kind of flowing. This is really exotic technology, and the big problem we have is we don't have enough equipment to measure it. Burke dragged around with him like $100,000 worth of equipment in backpacks and in storage containers to test this stuff. Most people don't, first of all, have $100,000 to test it. And secondly, I mean, he waited all night on the World Pyramid at Tikal to make these, to do the testing. And so you got to be very dedicated to do that. But Pumapuku, if you guys have been there, haven't you?
No, we haven't. I've been to Egypt, and I guess I meant Mexico, I guess. Do you see the same sort of stuff in Mexico where you have been? And I thought we should, I mean, I am interested because in South America, I've only seen the pictures now in South America, but there seems to be that same sort of the same nubs are in some of that stuff. And they seem to have the same sort of control over stone down there as
Prevalent
well.
in Mexico as you see in South America. But you guys have been to Egypt and you see them in some of the buildings there. I'm trying to think of the one stone building that is right next to Seti's temple and
The Osirian?
the
there?
Osirian. You guys saw that,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. That's like one of our favorite ones. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That thing is such an anomaly. And what's really strange is when and if they ever pump the water, because it's right on an underwater aquifer that streams water. That thing is some kind of an engine, right? And I had a guy with a handheld tri-field meter put up against some of those pillars, as you walk down in the middle. And some of the pillars were like really coming up with some amazing readings, but not all of them. So there's some kind of tech in there. And this is the big problem I have with archaeology, is that to really know about these previous civilizations, you have to do and focus on a multidisciplinary
Disciplinary. Yeah.
approach.
Yeah.
You got to get a chemist in there. You got to get an engineer in there. You got to get a field energy person in there. And I'll tell you, until we do that, we're going to be stumped. I'll tell you a great example. I was invited by Dr. Gomez, who excavated the pyramid at Teotihuacan, the snake pyramid, the serpent pyramid. I was lucky he invited us to go underneath the pyramid into this tunnel. And what they found in this tunnel, he didn't really care about. His whole goal was to find the body of a king. And they pull out all these artifacts. They had like 70,000 artifacts. Great. But when he was down in there, they found huge pools of liquid mercury.
Wow.
They found these really weird pyrite balls, these gold, pyrite's fool's gold, right? They found thousands of these balls. And the thing that really is weird is that I was talking to Ed Barnhart, who's a Mayanist.
Oh, damn. Right at the good part.
And when I mentioned this, he sent me some photographs of aerial shots of this pyramid, and they had underground and surface canals taking water from the nearby river, and they were being distributed into this tunnel. And when you get in there, there's a huge watermark that goes through the whole tunnel. The tunnel is 300 feet from end to end. And Gomez wasn't even interested in the water, what the mercury was all about, why the pyrite was in there. And my whole thing was, did they do an analysis of the dirt? Because they found 100,000 tons of dirt that they had to excavate. 100,000 tons. It took them 10 years.
Wow.
But
I mean,
they
that sounds very, using mercury and in and out chemical process to make gold or foos gold. I mean, it's weird. It's weird. Like that's what it makes me think of right away.
We weren't allowed to take pictures, but I had a couple of guys that had GoPro cameras on their chests, and I got a few shots. At the very end of the tunnel, which is directly underneath the pyramid, the ceiling is dark, like there's some kind of combustion that's going on.
Right.
So,
have you looked into drum stuff at all?
Like beating drums?
No, Jeffrey Drum,
Land of Chem,
Chemical Egypt. He thinks they were chemical processing plants.
I wouldn't be surprised. The one thing that I did discover is that people call that big city in Mexico Teotihuacan, but the Teotihuacan were the later people who showed up after this place was built, right? And you know why we know this? Because this tunnel that I was in was fed water from this perfectly formed circle, which was a well opening, and then it dropped into this tunnel. Well, the Tiwanakuns or Teotihuacans went behind the tunnel and dug to connect with the tunnel. So they weren't the original people. And they filled it with a bunch of idols. The guys who built Teotihuacan were engineers and mathematicians. They took water and they would carry it and then have it dump into a cistern, which is a holding tank. And then through various valve systems would distribute it into toilets, into washrooms, and into what looks like early kinds of baths. So
Wow, that's fascinating. So you get the sense that there was temples, newer temples built on these older sort of foundational works
yeah,
from potentially pre-Younger Dryas type thing, like a global civilization that has now been built on over and over again since the
yeah.
since
I
the
think, I mean,
cataclysm.
some people think that Teotihuacan was, 50, 60, 100,000 years old, but those are insane numbers.
Yeah,
But I mean, really, why not? Well, conventionally, we can't consider that because our own scientists cannot conceive of a date like that.
yeah,
And that's the big stumbling block we have.
yeah.
If we find extremely old societies, our science will not validate it. This is the big
Exactly.
problem we have right now.
I mean, it's getting closer and closer. I mean, we're getting pushed farther and farther back. I mean, even just humans, it was 200,000 years, and now it's 400,000 years. I mean, it's already doubled over the last 10 years. The accepted mainstream sort of paradigm of how long we've been around.
Yeah.
Um, and there's that one in Indonesia that seems to be causing a fuss about being
Gunung
30 or
Padang.
40,000. Gunung Padang, maybe.
Yeah, Gunung Padang's. I had Dr. Danny on the show years ago when they shut him down. It's funny because they shut him down when he did a carbon dating to 20,000 years in the past, right? But he had still 2 levels to go. And so wouldn't it be weird if he did a dig and a core that came up like 50,000 years ago? I mean,
Yeah.
if you saw Graham's Ancient Apocalypse, that was the first one. That was number one. That was the first program of him going out to Indonesia and talking to Danny Hillman. And so many geologists and archaeologists were still putting him down. He's like, oh, these are tainted samples. It's not possible that human beings were around then. Why not?
There's blocks because you've been to Karnak, and there's like a few blocks off to the edge there that no one really notices. There's like 3 of them there, and
Well, they're not in the. They're still in the
maybe
center.
they're,
I mean,
they're in the center, but they're not like part of the central temple. They're kind of like off in the grass, and they're granite blocks, and they're so weathered that we had a geologist in the group, and he was just like, there's nothing built. There's nothing. It's a fucking square granite block in the ground that you can tell had been worked. And he's like, dude, this is tens of thousands of years of weathering on this rock. He's like, this is too. It was
flooding,
the one rock
like
thing that was too much for him. He's like, there's no explanation for this that doesn't involve tens of thousands of years. Before, and the thing is, there was the corners where they had, so it's not like they had worked a weathered block. They had the corners were weathered. The notch of the little key thing was weathered. So this whole thing had been seemingly masoned, or whatever they call it. 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago. I said to him specifically 50,000 years, and he, wasn't against it. He wouldn't be like, yeah, but he was like,
it's funny because we have our education, and it's like history says before the Egyptians, we were hunters and gatherers. I mean, there's the Sumerians, but then there's hunters and gatherers. If you start pushing beyond that with dates, it just fucks everybody up. The scientists can't touch it. This is why I have such a problem with the National Geographic and the Smithsonian Institute, is that they are the historians. They're the ones who are sending out this information, and you're not getting this coverage over these anomalies in Egypt, in Mexico, in South America. Even in the United States and Canada, there's a native archaeologist who's redating settlements in current North America. And, it's like, up until she came around, it was like, well, 16,000 years ago, there were settlements in present day New Mexico, or there were settlements in present day Ontario. And, we have flint arrows to justify that. Well, she's come back and using oral traditions to push it way back, and also redating these sites. And now the average site, and she's found like 25 or 30 of these places in North America. The average age is 130,000 years ago.
Wow. What is some of the
Wasn't
other?
there- Sorry,
ahead.
Graham. Wasn't there a lady that found some fire pits down in Mexico and down in Southern America and in Northern
Yeah.
Mexico? And like way before this shit all started, way before Graham Hancock. And she said that those fire pits were, I think, 25 or 30,000 years old. And I remember listening to her and she was like, I was just saying, she's like, I wasn't saying there was a civilization or anything. She's like, the science says these fire pits are 25,000 years old. And she was like, run out of the business.
Her career was ruined. If you had her on your show, you guys were really fortunate.
I don't think we had her on the show. I listened to her on another show.
Okay.
Over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember her name, but she was I believe she was a geologist, and she brought in archaeologists. She actually dug down a few feet and found a number of different levels, and then dated the core samples. It came back to 20 plus thousand years ago with tools in those various sediments, and they couldn't accept it. So they shut her down. They blocked and filled the dig area.
Wow.
And she had her career ruined.
Ugh.
So
I can't find it. Do you think they're going to say sorry now?
I'm looking at, whose book has it? Michael Cremo has it in his book.
That's where I think I seen it on his Forbidden Archaeology documentary.
Yeah. I actually interviewed him about her a few years ago, and I can't think of her name. But she passed away recently, and because I was really wanting her on the show, she wasn't available. I think at some point we have to recognize that the tools that are part of conventional science are not valid anymore.
Right.
Because if you have to do blind studies to validate the authenticity of something, then you're only going to be able to go so far. And when you use the scientific method, you can't deal with civilizations that may be 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years or older. One of the things that I've come to in my conclusion, and you guys have been there in Egypt, is that many of the temples, and I'm also mentioning the Khufu pyramid, but like Hathor Temple, Karnak, and other temples were repurposed. My belief was that they were built perhaps 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. That civilization died off, and the pre-dynastic into the dynastic pharaohs repurposed them. And one of the things that Muhammad Ibrahim, who's our guide when we're in Egypt, and he just finished a new book on this, has come to understand is people like Ramses and Seti put their cartouche on these cities, on these temples, on these statues as an ego. Like, I'm here, this is part of my reign, when they were actually from an earlier period. So when I say repurposed, not just the temples, and we see this at Hathor there's thousands of years of updates and changes and migrating cultures. But we see it all through Egypt in this repurposing and these egotistical pharaohs going, hey, that kind of looks like me, that statue. So I'm going to put my cartouche on there. And this is something that Egyptologists will not admit. It's like, oh no, I couldn't have been. The ego, because everyone thinks Ramses II was a wonderful builder. I'm really beginning to think that he was just repurposing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same as we went with the Komet school when we went.
Yeah.
Virginia Steen McIntyre.
There
Someone
she
said
is.
and that's right. That is right. If I remember correctly. So you've been doing this about as long as we did. Were you in all the way into the mysteries when you started it? Has it gotten deeper since you got in it? And how has it affected everything else? Because I mean, we started out this podcast just want to do paranormal and am I cut out?
Yeah, just lost you for a minute.
So
yeah, I heard that. So I've been kind of a spiritual person since I was very young. If I'm really honest, and I wouldn't have said this a few years ago, you come back into a lifetime because you needed to finish something, right? So I incarnated to be a provider of knowledge, to remember these earlier periods. And when I was a program director, I had people that were everything you can imagine. Personal growth means what? Spirituality, channeled information, angels,
healing, yeah.
Everything, And so I'm kind of an open book to that stuff, but I'm also very skeptical. I was one of the, not me personally, but I was very much interested in UFOs way back when, and had guys like Dr. John Mack at the program and Bud Hopkins, some of the early, not necessarily investigators, because prior to them, there were other people at the turn, like in the 1950s and 60s, when the waves started coming on the UAPs. But these guys, if you don't know who John Mack is, he was a psychiatrist at Harvard who almost ruined his career by analyzing people who had been abducted, right? And discussing their experience with off-world types. Well, I mean, I've been into it so long that I'm at the point now where I'm like, land your goddamn ship, come out, say hello, tell us what planet you're from, and where we as a civilization fit in the scheme of things, right? So, and right now it's like, oh, great. The Navy, the United States Navy and other armed forces have taken pictures of Tic Tacs, and they've discovered the UAPs are, here, and, what are they doing? Well, they don't know, the technology.
Now we wonder if not only that, now we wonder if we can trust them.
Yeah. Well, you guys are in Canada. And you had what was it? Was it a minister that actually
Hellier? Yeah.
Yeah. When he retired, he was like spilling the beans, man. He's like, there's this many races that are visiting the world. I mean, if we had a guy like that in the United States, you'd hear him one time and you never hear him again.
So has it jaded you at all, or made you more cynical about?
That's what I'm saying.
About life in general, because it's hard to keep doing this and find out that the state has lied to you about history, and they've been lying to us about all these different things. And I mean, you talked about John Mack. I mean, some people think he got killed for what he was getting into, and how because we tend to avoid it too, but other people get sucked into this thing where it's like you can get sort of jaded on life just because it just sort of, the longer you do a podcast on these sorts of things, it just seems like the more and more things that you find out that they're lying to you about.
But Darren, you must know, and Graham too, you guys have been doing it long enough. You can see and feel a resurgence, and also kind of an opening. This information isn't so woo-woo anymore.
Totally.
It's like when I was, in my 20s, it was like, you're in the new age. And let's get into crystals, and let's meditate, and let's, navigate the cosmos in our, in our
consciousness.
Yeah, whatever. Oh, I was going to say psychic readings,
Yeah.
Well, all this is that's the foundation. And what's happening now is our science is beginning to validate these unseen energies. And as we become more aware that this is what we're surrounded with, and we can validate it, then it's like, well, it's not woo-woo anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying about the UFOs. I'm like, for years, it's like, okay, the ships landed and there was, the guy got abducted and okay, that, but what else? The
Yeah.
problem is that as a culture, I think that we're not ready to have face-to-face quite yet. I think we got a few years to go. And it's an indoctrination. We see the ships, occasionally they land, somebody has a really high-res camera, they can take a picture. I had a NASA astronomer on who published a book of his of UFOs in Los Angeles coming through what looked like a Stargate. And he had pages and pages of this shit. When NASA found out, the Men in Black came to visit him, and his life hasn't been the same. But it's like, why not show this stuff?
I think, you know what, I think I'm beginning to think this because I'm right there with you. I mean, we've been talking about UFOs for 11 years and I've seen enough myself. I've gone out and CE5 them and stuff like that. But I mean, now I think that our reality is so complicated and complex, maybe even dark, maybe not what we want to know, maybe we're ants in this reality, and I don't know if we can even understand. Like they would have to kind of give it to us in little bits, which why not? But I mean, I just think that's why the government won't let us know either, because it might be a little bit more messed up than we think.
I think there's a bunch of secrecy. I think that our government is antiquated. I'm writing a book right now on the Black Knight satellite.
Oh, right.
And in 1960, NASA had the Brookings Institute do a survey on what the reaction would be of United States citizens to the unveiling or the first contact scenario. 1960, right?
Yeah.
And in that document, they basically say that people would freak out, they would kill themselves, institutions would fail, churches would dry up, and it would be mayhem, right? Well, the problem with that is that that's 1960. They're still following that today.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
how backward our country is,
Yeah, I think we're ready for it. I mean, all these other countries, like you said, there's other countries. France was open to it. South America falling behind in that respect for sure.
As a culture. The other thing is the NASA did Department of Defense did another survey where they went to theologians, which are priests and rabbis and other church leaders, and again asked them the same questions, and the same thing came up. Well, they would leave religion, they would want to kill themselves, and so on. My whole thing about that is like, why are you asking the church? Because people are leaving the church in droves. Why don't you ask the social media leaders, YouTube, Facebook, X, which was formerly Twitter, get their feeling about it? And I swear to God, you're going to have people go, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on, man. We want to see this stuff.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the, like you were mentioning how the dating should be we're stuck with our science and all that. What are some of the main evidences you think are there that you pay attention to that would push the date back? Like if you were to give a team of archaeologists or an institute, hey, here's the evidence that I've found or that I know about, what do you think that would be?
So the big one is, and you guys know this one, you go to Egypt, right? You go to the Hathor temple. You guys have been to the Hathor, right? In Dendera.
Dendera, yeah.
Beautiful temple, right? Well, they're very meticulously slow at digging and excavating. But about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, they've discovered that that temple sits on a very early temple underneath it. In fact, if you look around on the outer edges of the interior floor, there's the top of the columns of the temple underneath.
Yeah.
There's some weirdness about Egypt's antiquities department, they won't do ground penetrating radar. They won't sink any kind of camera work into that area. They have found the crypts. You guys have been in the crypts, right? In Hathor, there's those rooms that you go down under the floor.
Yep.
That's
You go all the way to the small tunnel there. Yep.
Yeah, that's.
Yep.
Did you go to the one that you
Yep.
see the Dendera light
Yep.
bulb?
Yeah.
You saw that, right?
Yep, that's
Well,
right.
they've opened a couple of more since then, which is still sub-level. So we have a block in our knowledge. I think it's also a fear of a big discovery. You know what I mean? If they were to date this temple underneath the Hathor temple and it is like 20,000 years old, they're gonna shit.
Yeah.
It's like, why do they shit? Because they have to rewrite everything.
Yeah.
It's rewriting the story.
There were spots at Karnak where you could see the tops of old columns as well. They don't let me have that spot like blocked off. I tried to go in there, they chased me out. And then they were like chasing me around Karnak. It's kind of comical because I just know they want money.
Well, it's worth it sometimes. And here's a great example.
Sometimes I keep a pocket full of $20 bills just in case
or
I need to get in someplace. Yeah.
I you know about the high quality carved stone vases and plates that they found at Saqqara, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you'll get a kick out of this one, Cliff.
Oh, dude, you got one.
I got one.
Oh, hold on a second. I'll show you what I got.
Don't tell Ben. That, of course, for people who haven't seen before, this is my piece of granite vase that I took from underneath the bent pyramid. Was it the bent pyramid, Graham, or the step pyramid?
I get them mixed up in the red and the bent and the
There's
step.
the one that has all the stuff underneath it.
So Adam Young used to be on my show, and Adam has these complete vases, right? And he was on the show maybe 8-9 years ago. He had a full vase. Back then you could get one for a few grand. Now they're 10, 20, 30 grand. I asked my leader, Muhammad, if he could get me a piece. So he put me in touch with an archaeologist that was excavating Saqqara. Look at this cup. This is solid stone. Oops, there we go.
Yeah.
It's perfectly cut down the middle.
That's beauty.
And then this one is just the top of a vase.
Ooh, that's a good one too. How'd you get that big one out? I had to stick mine in my boot.
You know, it's funny because I think the reason they only gave me fragments is if they had opened my bag and seen a whole vase, I would have been screwed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Dude, when I left Egypt, I had we had to stop in the hotel quick on the way because I had taken these rocks. I bet you I came home with like 18 pounds of rocks and
whoa,
and like 10 pounds of antibiotics, and then a bunch of this, all this stuff that we can't get here in Canada. I was like, I just try and take a little shaving or a little piece of this or a piece of that from each site. And
I think what you're going to find out is that these vases, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the latest about the analysis, how it's following these mathematical transversal patterns.
Ben and I don't, you guys know him. And then Chris Dunn's son, Alex, did that analysis. You know, it's funny because we don't have the technology really to look very deeply into those things. It's like they need to, we know the thinness of the walls and the cutting, but no one is saying how it was cut.
No. But I mean, even just from a sacred, there seems to be some, let's say, just some magic involved with why it was made. Almost like I think that's what the key is to this, is that there's some nature aspect, some sacred geometry aspect, like you talked about the ley lines and harnessing this energy. Well, we'll probably find that the volume is a special octave of volume, or there's some kind of there's some amazing reason why it's that size and why it follows those mathematical patterns, because we wouldn't be making a vase these days in any kind of pattern.
Yeah, I think George Leonard has been talking about that. He runs and produces Cosmic Summit
Yeah, George Howard. Yeah, yeah,
George Howard, sorry.
yeah.
And he's kind of thinking that it could be not necessarily a vase for putting liquid or something in, but it had another purpose. Perhaps we don't know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
but the cutting, whatever the technique is fairly very advanced.
Yeah, there's clear machine marks on mine. So I
Yeah.
got one more to show you here, because I took another chunk, and we had the same geologist that was on the trip with us was also a jeweler, a hobby jeweler. So I had him make these out of the other chunk that I brought home.
Did you go down the Saqqara shaft to grab yours, or did you just say I need to find somebody who could sell me stuff?
We were underneath the bent pyramid.
Oh, the bent pyramid. Okay.
Is it so? It's not, I don't know if it's the bent or the step. It's the one that's not beside the red pyramid.
Well, there's the bent, and then the red pyramid, and then you go to Saqqara, and that's the Dozier pyramid.
It must have been the step pyramid. So it's the bent pyramid that's next to the red pyramid.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was the one that was on its own. So it must have been this. Oh, sorry. It must have. Oh God.
Did you make this? Looks like jewelry.
Yeah, my buddy made jewelry. Yeah, I had him made pendants for all my daughters and my sister, and earrings for my mom and me mom, who's probably watching. Hi, mom, and a ring for my missus.
That's really nice, dude. That's great.
I went back and forth because I wasn't sure if it would be like cursed or something, or what the thing was. But I was like, this shit is gonna sit under here until it's smashed into dust, or until the Egyptian government changes and no one's allowed to come back. Or I feel like it's better off being turned into some jewelry than turning into nothing where it's at. Because when you go there, you really realize how precarious this access and the situation over there kind of is. And it's like, at any moment, especially with the new bricks and everything else, it seems like anytime I could find out that going to Egypt ain't an option anymore.
Well, their income is based on tourism, so they're trying to keep their doors open as much as possible. Some people don't care. Like I said before we started, I had a good sized group that was going to come with me in April, and I lost half of them because of the volatility of the war, and also how close it is. It isn't that close, but if you're flying, it's really, really close, And then again, the American State Department's like, don't go. There's trouble there. Don't go. Not saying you can't go, but just be careful. So I've always felt safe in Egypt. I mean, I don't leave the hotels and go wandering off. That's just kind of crazy, but it's made for tourism. Now, the real big problem is they've had this Grand Egyptian Museum sitting idly for years. And I'm going to be a little crass about my feeling about this. It's very poorly organized. They have $1 billion museum with what is now known as the largest artifacts collection in the world, and they can't seem to open it. You would think
we were supposed to go in 2022, and from what I hear, it's still not open. The people who went on the 2024 tour still couldn't go.
It's like an embarrassment for the city, because the money that this thing could generate would be probably several hundred million a quarter, and the thing's a monster, but they can't seem to get beyond a problem here, a problem there. It's almost like another organization needs to take over that understands how to run a museum and just charges the antiquities department a fee, because I've been waiting 6 years now, and we don't even think about it. And you guys know this. You go to Cairo, and the old museum's still there, right? Downtown. And they got a couple of good pieces, but it's not like,
And then you're driving by the new one on the way to the hotel.
And everyone's going, can we go? Can we go? And you're kind of like, it's not open. Sorry.
So do you have a trip coming? Can you let us know before we wrap up what your trips are this year and where people can sign up for those? where they can
Sure.
find the
Yeah.
podcast on that?
Our Grand Egyptian Tour is April 28th through May 9th. You can read about the itinerary, which we're updating constantly, by the way. You can go to earthancients.com/tours.
Do you guys do the Nile cruise?
We do the part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do Nile, which is kind of cool, right? You guys have done that, right?
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The Nile cruise is really nice. It's also great if it's really hot out. So, oh yeah, there you go. And then we are in Turkey, August 14th through the 24th. We're going to be in Cappadocia. They reopened Derinkuyu, the underground city. We'll be in Göbekli Tepe. Karahan Tepe, they just closed, so we won't be able to go there. But we'll be in 12 days in Turkey. Some of the museums I've been wanting to go for eons. And then the final tour of the year is Mexico, Yucatan, Mexico. It's the Pyramid Tour. It is November 8th to the 17th. We all meet in Merida, and we learn how to climb pyramids. We start with the Mayapan Pyramid, which is in northern Yucatan. And by the end, your skill is so good that you can climb the Grand Pyramid at Uxmal and also some smaller pyramids around the city of Merida.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you can see all of them at earthancients.com/tours.
Man, I was looking at that Mexico one thinking I might go, but we have an event that same weekend here in Canada.
You guys are hanging out with Randall. He must be like fun, man, because he can talk forever.
Randall's a character. Yeah, he's I was actually just talking to him yesterday, booking him for the show in 2 weeks, but we have another event coming up with him in May. If people want to get tickets for that, they go contact at thecabin.com. Of course, we have I think there's like 7 spots or 8 spots left for that. And then we have another one with Randall, the Columbia Gorge tour in the fall. But yeah, I don't know. We were lucky enough to get to know Randall and become good friends, and now we're doing all these events with them. This will be our 5th Scablands tour, Graham.
Wow.
Yeah, 5th or 6th. Yeah.
So you guys actually meet in Seattle, and then go out to the gorge?
We go to the Spokane. We use Spokane for both of them.
Spokane. Oh, right.
Yeah.
And then you just
because there's a couple sites that are closer to Spokane that we want to hit for sure. So yeah.
Excellent.
And then this is the gorge is the first time we've done that section of Washington. So
do you guys take a weekend, 4 days?
a week, 4 or 5 days. Yeah.
So you have is there like a museum? I have a book by one of the geologists who first, I think Randall suggested in his lectures, who's one of the early geologists who actually made that call that it was a huge wave that carved all that.
Yeah.
We start in Spokane. We stay right at the Soap Lake Resort. So we stay like right at the bottom of the coulee. We're about 15 minutes from the Dry Falls, which is the big one he uses in his Joe Rogan experience. So
cool.
It really is. It's something else. I said I wasn't going to go back to Egypt, but I'm feeling the hanker and seeing the pictures again. I might go back next year. We'll see.
Do that, or you're always welcome to join our tours. Mexico is very reasonable. Remember, it's like 22 pesos to $1. So a Canadian dollar is probably a little less, but your money goes really far.
Yeah.
And you don't have to sit on a plane to Cairo because that's a long flight.
That's exactly what kills me. That's what it's like. It's too much. The flights to get to even to Europe, because the Tychos guys want me to go. They're having their first Tychos space model conference this summer. And I'm like, dude, that's 10 hours in that plane seat. I don't know if I could do it, man. I'll drive 30 hours like tomorrow. Let's go. Because I can stop my truck whenever I want. I can get out. I can do things. I'm not stuck in their weird little system, but the planes are almost too much for me. And you know how it is, because once you get east of the UK, man, the leg room gets shorter and shorter.
Yeah, I used to have trouble flying because I don't sleep in planes, right? So I'm in San Francisco, so it's like 22 hours. You fly from San Francisco to Frankfurt. I fly Lufthansa because the European airlines just have more amenities. And then you do a layover in Frankfurt, and then you fly 4 more hours to Cairo, and you're just cooked.
And then it's go.
Yeah, then it's like you're the host. Hey, welcome. How you doing? You're feeling like sandbags on your legs. So
you don't sleep for the first 3 or 4 nights. So what about the podcast? Where can people get the podcast? And so
any place you get your podcast. Earth Ancients has been around, celebrating our 10th year. Whatever your distribution center is, wherever you get your podcast. If you don't have a distributor, and that's iTunes or Skype, not Skype, but Spotify, whoever you get your podcasts with is great. If not, go to earthancients.com, and we have each episode going way back to the the beginning of podcasting.
Feels like it sometimes. And when we started, we weren't sure if we were too late or not.
Too late?
Well, that's how we had conversations when we started the show in 2013, because it seemed like there was already so many shows. We're like, well, is it?
They faded. You guys are to be applauded, and let me tell you why. I used to help people launch, and that's how I launched mine. I was helping 2 clients. I was a marketing consultant, and this is like 2009, and they're like, "Will you launch a podcast for me? I really want to learn about it. I really want to try it." And the thing about it is, it was easy to launch. It's still easy to launch, fairly easy to launch a podcast. But the thing about it is, and this is where you need to be applauded, is consistency. Even when you don't feel like doing it,
yeah, I knew you were
put something on.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a kick-ass guest, you make it interesting, and that's the key. That's the key, is consistency. You're doing it, and you guys rock. I like your website. You have like really cool little graphics for each episode, and you're putting energy into it, a positive creative energy. And that's why your audience loves you guys. So
thanks, man.
Rock it. Keep on rocking.
Thanks, man. That's great.
Kind words. Happy 10 years.
Thanks,
for
dude.
sure. And here's to 10 more. And I might take you up. I might show up on one of your Mexico tours here yet.
You got my email, send it to me. Egypt's not cheap because the flights are so damn expensive, and then the hotels. But Mexico, cheap, and the food is amazing.
And it's chill. It's 4 hours. Jump on the plane for 4 hours and you're there.
From where you are, yeah. The other thing, and I always tell this about people, and this goes for most countries outside of the United States, their museums have so many anomalies that'll blow you away.
Wow.
Little figures holding technology, guys riding in airplanes. I have a collection of little figurines that are wearing full-on spacesuits. And for the years, the archaeologists would say, well, that's a ceremonial suit. And I'd say, no. This guy's got a visor. He's got a breathing apparatus. He's got air tanks on. He's got heavy gauge suit. They're not ceremonial.
They might be having glimpses of the future or the past.
Deep past. Yeah. So the museums in Mexico are just world class.
I've never gone to Mexico and like not done the resort thing, so I might just have to do that. I could show up on that one. Yeah, Cliff, this has been great. Let's not wait 10 years to do it again.
Darren, Graham, a pleasure to meet you guys. Keep it rocking, buddies.
Thanks. See you later.
Yeah. And that was a chat with the one and only Cliff Dunning, Earth Ancients. It's hard to believe it took 10 years to have him on, but great chat.
Yeah, that was a blast. Yeah. Fantastic. It was great to do some more Maya Yucatan stuff again. Just kind of ingrain that in me. I'm blown away by how much is out there. My friend Rye lives there in Campeche. He's got to get on this, man.
We should be sending him out in the field. If it's 22-1, then we could get him for like fucking $3 an hour.
Rent that car. Let's go for a ride.
Rent the car, get some Mexican weed, and I will go pyramid hunting to get out anytime. You tell me. So big thanks to Cliff for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Guys, big thanks if you're supporters. We couldn't do this other, but we don't have enough supporters. We really don't. So we did start doing the thing where if you do support the show, grimerica.ca/support, well, if you sign up for a new monthly or make a one-time donation, send in a note and we'll read it on the show. Read your note, give you a little shout out, and say thanks to you because we couldn't do the show without you. So do that, and we'd love you for it. Of course, the live guys will be back in a couple weeks. We got some great shows coming up in 2 weeks. Charlie Robinson and Randall Carlson. I forget who else on the Tuesday. And of course, we'll have next week, no shows, but we do have the roundup coming up every Wednesday on Grimerica Outlawed for people who are into that. GrimericaOutlawed.ca. Grimerica.ca/support to support this show. And adultbrain.ca for all the audiobooks. The website just got a facelift. So you can head over to adultbrain.ca and get the audiobooks. Every way you can get our audiobooks, you can kind of get through there, other than buying them. If you're buying audiobooks someplace, then if you just search Graham Dunlop or Adult Brain, our books will come up. But if you go to adultbrain.ca, that'll get you to the YouTube, to the podcast, all that kind of stuff. Grimerica.ca/swag if you want swag. Grimerica.ca/support for support. GrimericaOutlawed.ca for outlawed. Contact at the cabin for all those trips we were talking about. Let us know.
The swag shop might be it might need a little bit of attention. The swag shop might be a little overwhelming for people. It's filled with one big design that's quite controversial. So
is it?
Yeah, you should see the front of it.
Is it the Unvax Lives Matter one?
Look at it. Look at it. This is the front page of the swag shop. Oh, look, there's the Grimerica logo, and then just boom.
Bum, 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 bum. All right, guys. We love you. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.